Hey, what's going on, Ram fans? Let's get this going again. My dissection of the Rams schedule. Now, last episode, I talked about the AFC teams the Rams are playing, those four AFC South teams plus the Ravens. So if you want to hear that, want to watch that, go back one episode. Got a lot of interesting nuances and let's call it trivia out of this Rams 2025 schedule. Check it out and made some sort of kind of predictions of how that might go. Those 5 games against the AFC South, how they stack up, key players, all that good stuff. This is part 2. We're going to be talking about our NFC South opponents. We'll walk through those 4 opponents and let's get through some stuff to kick us off here. Already went over this a previous episode, the preseason games, Cowboys, Chargers, and Browns, and then we move on to weeks 1 through 8. And weeks 1 through 8, we have all 5 of the AFC teams. We'll be done with the AFC until the Super Bowl, anyways, by the end of week 8. And in these first 8 games, we have none of the NFC South teams. They all come in the second half, weeks 9 through 18. We got the Saints on November 2nd. And then the Buccaneers on that Sunday night, November 23rd. That's a Sunday before Thanksgiving. That's followed by the Panthers. And then we have the Falcons on Monday night, week 17. So those are the 4 NFC South games we're going to talk about this episode. And the first thing that struck me about the NFC South as I went through the team's rosters, their key players, draft picks, gathering information on these 4 opponents is the number of ex-Rams scattered across this division. Man, there are a bunch of them. Well, we start with head coach Raheem Morris, right? He's there in Atlanta. Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, Brandon Cooks in New Orleans, Austin Corbett in Carolina, 2 defensive tackles, Greg Gaines and Bobby Brown in Tampa Bay and Carolina, respectively. You could almost field an entire defense with ex-Rams here. 2 linebackers, Leonard Floyd is in Atlanta, Christian Roseboom in Carolina. Defensive tackle Ashawn Robinson is in Carolina, and defensive end Morgan Fox is in Atlanta. Nick Scott in Carolina, Jordan Fuller in Atlanta, and Terrell Burgess in New Orleans. And if you noticed a trend there, yes, Raheem Morris has brought on board some Rams that played with him in Los Angeles, and that makes perfect sense if you think about it. So then the first team we're going to talk about, and they are the first NFC South team on our schedule, and that is the New Orleans Saints. They have a new head coach, Kellen Moore. I think that's a really good hire. I never understood the Dennis Allen hire, to be honest with you. So Kellen Moore, pretty good offensive mind on board there. The Saints last year, 5-12, last place in the NFC South. And, the big event in New Orleans, of course, is Derek Carr retiring, decided he didn't want to battle back through that shoulder injury. Maybe there was more going on there than just that. But the last time these 2 teams played, well, first, the Rams do hold a significant edge here. 45 wins to 35 losses. These 2 teams were rivals in the old Western Division of the National Football League. Rams hold the 45 to 35 edge. Last time they played in New Orleans last year, the Rams pulled out a 21 to 14 win. That was the game, man. It was pretty dreadful. My special assistant was there, and he flew out to New Orleans with some buddies, and I felt so bad for him at halftime. 6-0 New Orleans, and the Rams stormed back and won that game. That was the game Taysom Hill got hurt his knee, tore his ACL. So the new head coach, Kellen Moore, trying to get this franchise turned around, and they're going to go probably with the rookie quarterback, second-round pick, Tyler Shugg. My understanding is that the Rams liked him a lot, weren't ready to pick him that early, but they probably would have been satisfied if they would been able to get him in a later round. At least that's the word on the street. They do have Spencer Rattler in camp there as well. Then there's Chris Olave. He missed 9 games last year. A very good receiver. And then Alvin Kamara. He's been around forever, right? Nearing 7,000 career yards, rushing yards. Brandon Cooks, defensive end Cameron Jordan, cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry. I don't know if Kool-Aid is that key of a player, but I just love his name. And then there's safety Tyrann Mathieu. And outside linebacker Chase Young, I swear it seems like he's played for every team in the league by now. An impact player, probably never lived up to his draft position where he was drafted, but a pretty darn good player nonetheless. So what is this team doing in the offseason? Well, Brandon Cooks is one of the free agent signings. They also signed safety Justin Reed. He will replace last year's safety Will Harris, who jumped over to the Commanders. And they brought back 2 former Saints, center Will Clapp and cornerback Isaac Yiadom. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Their draft picks, well, they drafted Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle, in the first round. Or is he a guard? Some scouts, some experts see him limited to the interior offensive line due to his wingspan, shorter arms. And if that's the case, and I don't know, I know the interior offensive line is extremely important, but I don't think I ever want my team drafting a guard or a center in the first round. That's just how I feel about it. But if Kelvin Banks can anchor that left side, they went offensive line, offensive tackle last year in the first round. So if they're trying to shore up the offensive line for, a young quarterback, protect him, get this franchise turned around, maybe that's a good strategy. Kellen Moore knows what he's doing. And then they, in the draft, who else did they take after Banks and Shug? They took defensive tackle Vernon Broughton, safety Jonas Sanker, and linebacker Danny Stutzman. Those are 3 guys we talked about pre-draft. Last year, 5-12, last place in the NFC South. Things just did not go well for this team. They fired Dennis Allen after a 2-7 start. Didn't do anything especially well on offense. Of course, their top receiver, Olave, was out for much of the year, and their defense was the 3rd worst as far as yards allowed per game, and they were 2nd worst defending the run. And this is a Saints team that historically, they've played pretty good defense. That has not been the case more recently. So the Saints, the Rams get them in what week is that? They get them in, hold on here 1 second, week 9. So basically kicking off the second half of the season. And this is at home. I would expect the Rams to win this game. This is a team that, they're rebuilding. Kellen Moore I think he's a really good hire. And eventually this team is going to start playing better offense. They need to get the defense shored up, get back to where it was a couple of years ago. But, this team's, a few steps away from being extremely competitive. But, they gave the Rams a run for their money last year in New Orleans, coming back to LA. And, Saints fans, they're never going to forget that game, that playoff game. The non-call on the pass interference, they still have it in for us, but I don't think it's going to happen this year for them. Rams, Saints, week 9. We'll make the predictions here, sort of, kind of, at the end of the segment here. Let's move on to the next team. Who do we got next? We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We get the Buccaneers in week 12. This is a Sunday night football game before Thanksgiving. Rams lead this series 19 wins and 10 losses. And these teams have some really good history, mostly history that the Bucs want to forget and the Rams love remembering. There was that 9-0 playoff win by the Rams, Jack Youngblood, that sent them to the Super Bowl. There was the catch by Ricky Prohl that sent the greatest show on turf to the Super Bowl. And then there was the Cooper Kupp catch and the field goal that sent the Rams to another Super Bowl. getting by Tom Brady and that great comeback. Last time they played, 2022, Bucks 16, Rams 13. Rams led 13-6 going into the fourth quarter, but could not hang on. Tom Brady rallying them for the win. Key players, Baker Mayfield, man, he should have been in the Pro Bowl last year. 4,500 yards passing, 41 TDs. Wide receiver Mike Evans, remember he had that 1,004 yards, and as you recall, he needed that one catch to get the bonus, and his team and his coach got it for him. Bucky Irvin, great young running back. Chris Godwin, the wide receiver, is coming back from injury. Offensive lineman Tristan Wirf, he's an all-pro player. And defensive tackle Vita Vea, one of the best in the business, just a great big body run stopper. And Levante David, the great linebacker, getting a little long in the tooth, but can't leave him out as far as key players go. He may not be the impact player he was in years past, but I'm not leaving him off this list, that's for sure. Their big free agent signing was bringing on linebacker Hassan Reddick, a guy that can really get after the quarterback. And their draft picks, a lot of people were surprised they took Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, and I think that's tied to the Chris Godwin injury. They also drafted cornerback Benjamin Morris out of Notre Dame, and the little speed demon, wide receiver Tez Johnson. A lot of folks, including myself, are really concerned about his size. Is it like 5'9", 175, something like that? Might even be 5'8". But I think it was either the Combine or Senior Bowl practices. I think it was the Combine. He was just dusting cornerbacks. Nobody could cover him. So the Rams have shied away from receivers of that size, but maybe Tez Johnson will change everyone's opinion. Now, Egbuka is an interesting case. A lot of us saw him as a late first rounder, maybe even a second rounder. Really great wide receiver class. And then as soon as he is selected, everybody's like, yep, man, this guy, high character, team leader, he is going to be getting it done from day one. There's no development needed here, no transitioning to the NFL game. He is going to be good to go from day one. And now a lot of people thinking the Buccaneers may have gotten a steal. Although I did see one critique saying, what the heck are the Bucs doing drafting Egbuka in the first round? But I have a feeling they may be onto something there. So last year, what did the Bucs do? 10-7. They won the NFC South, and they got bounced by a Commanders team that was on a roll, 23-20. They had the third best offense in the league last year, 399.5 yards a game. Really struggled to defend the pass, though. That was their Achilles heel. But this team with Baker Mayfield and these receivers and Bucky Irvin, they are going to be really tough to handle. They're going to put the ball in the end zone a lot, and teams are going to just have to outscore them, is what I'm thinking. Really good football team. Love what Baker Mayfield has done there, and I think he can thank Sean McVay for a lot of that, in my opinion. So who do we got next? The Carolina Panthers, coached by David Canales. It's his second season there. Last year, they went 5-12, third place in the NFC South. The Panthers lead this series, 13 wins and 10 losses. The last time they met, Rams 24, Panthers 10. That was in 2022. And I'll give you a second here. Who do you think scored the Rams 3 touchdowns in that game? Who are you thinking? You thinking Allen Robinson? Probably not. How about Ben Skowronek? Absolutely not. And then Darrell Henderson. Those were the 3 guys, the 3 players that scored touchdowns for the Rams in that game. The most memorable game in this series, in my opinion, is easily the 2004 playoff game, double overtime. Jake Delhomme to Steve Smith for how many yards was it? 69 yards. Jason Sehorn was in on that play. I think he stumbled and maybe got clipped by one of his own players. Smith, pretty much easy score, and the Rams season was over. And I kind of see that game as the end of the greatest show on turf. Sad as it is to say, we entered some dark days after that. But bad memories with Carolina, that's for sure. Now, their key players, quarterback Bryce Young was starting to look like a little bit of a bust for a while there. And then last year started to come on, started to look like a real NFL quarterback. There's so many quarterbacks in this league that get drafted early and just peter out and never make it. And I forget who it was. Someone said it, these quarterbacks don't fail. It's the franchises that fail. And the Panthers are probably tempted to give up on Bryce Young. And so shout out to them for sticking with him, giving him some more time to develop. And maybe that was the right thing to do. We'll find out this year. Bryce Young could end up being a pretty decent quarterback. Running back Chuba Hubbard, wide receiver Adam Thielen, two more key players on offense. Thielen led the team in receiving with just 615 yards. Guard Robert Hunt was a Pro Bowler, and cornerback J.C. Horn, pretty solid player too. He was a Pro Bowler as well. A bunch of ex-Rams, as I mentioned at the top here. Center Austin Corbett, nose tackle Bobby Brown, safety Nick Scott, linebacker Christian Roseboom, and defensive tackle Ashawn Robinson. And they brought in two key free agents. I think they're going to help a lot. Tershawn Wharton, the defensive tackle, came over from the Chiefs, and safety Trevon Moehrig came over from the Raiders. Their draft picks, and probably, the key draft pick, they brought in Tatario McMillan. We're calling him T-Mac from here on, the wide receiver out of Arizona, and he's the guy, big strapping receiver, can take the top off, can play physical. And the word on the street is the Rams are trying to trade up to draft him. We'll never know how, maybe eventually we'll find out how true that was. I know Ian has some doubts about that. I was really surprised that the Rams would try to trade up for a wide receiver. Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams in the house, and they've been so good at finding receivers later in the draft. They're going to move up to try to draft a wide receiver. If that's the case, they must have really loved what they saw in McMillan, that's for sure. But yeah, McMillan was their pick, the 8th pick overall. And then after that, they went two edge rushers, Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M, and Princely. Oh man, this is going to be a fun one. Princely Umanamielen, edge rusher out of Mississippi. And hey, you know what? You try saying that name. And I'll have to go to YouTube and see how you pronounce that. Hopefully they come up with a nickname for him really quick. So last year, as I said, 5-12, a 5-game losing streak, another 4-game losing streak, just 188 passing yards per game, third worst in the league. And they gave up a league worst 31 points a game. And as you know, when your offense is mediocre, it really just puts more and more pressure on your defense. So it's hard to say how bad this defense really was, but they certainly weren't bailing out the offense. And we saw that back in the day with the Rams when they had some pretty good defensive squads, but their offense was just so horrible. By the end of the game, the other team's putting up a 27 spot on us, and people just assume our defense sucks. That's not always the case. If you just have a decent defense, but your offense is 3 and out over and over again, eventually your average defense is going to start breaking. Okay, let's move on to our final NFC South team, the Atlanta Falcons. We'll see them on Monday night, week 17, and we're going to see our old buddy Raheem Morris. The Falcons going into last year were the darlings of the league. Everybody thought they were going to win that division, make a playoff run, but it didn't happen. Raheem Morris is a good coach. I think he's got him pointed in the right direction. Hopefully he's accumulating the correct players there, slowly adding impact guys, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what they did in the draft. But their key players, quarterback Michael Penix finally getting his shot. Running back Bijan Robinson, one of the best in the league. Wide receiver Drake London out of USC. Guard Chris Lindstrom is a Pro Bowler. And tackle Jake Matthews, seems like he's been around forever. Pretty darn solid. And they have 3 ex-Rams. Talked about it earlier. Defensive end Morgan Fox, linebacker Leonard Floyd, and safety Jordan Fuller. All these guys crossed paths with Raheem Morris with the Rams, and he's bringing them over to the Falcons to hopefully get this team squared away. Draft picks. So they went the linebacker Jalen Walker early in the draft, then they traded up with the Rams so they could draft edge rusher James Pierce. And then they also drafted safety Xavier Watts. So 3 impact defensive players, hopefully. The one thing that they were horrible at last year was getting to the quarterback. Really bad, second worst in the league, just 31 sacks. The only team with fewer sacks than the Falcons was the Patriots. And defense makes sense when you consider where they had issues last year, and their head coach, Raheem Morris, a defensive-minded coach, and they seem to have the offensive weapons in place. Penix, Robinson, London, decent offensive line. They got Kyle Pitts, the tight end, who has never measured up to the expectations, but still a decent tight end. So they had to shore up the defense, and that's what they did. So how do I think it's going to go for the Rams against these 4 teams? Well, I think they're better than all 4 of these teams, but that sometimes doesn't count for anything. I think the worst case is the Rams go 2-2 in this division. When you consider, Tampa Bay, it's going to be a dogfight with them. Atlanta's going to be improved. They got 2 road trips to the east, right? Atlanta and Carolina. But I feel like they got to beat Carolina and they have to beat New Orleans. So the worst case is they lose the other 2. And I really think that's the chances of that happening are pretty slim. I think it's 3-1 might be the true worst case, but I'm going to roll with 2-2. And the best case is they could sweep these teams. They could absolutely sweep the entire NFC South, and that would be awesome, needless to say. And so where does that leave us? We talked about the best and worst case versus the 5 AFC teams, and I said the worst case against the AFC was 3-2, and the best case was 4-1. So you add it together, and at this point, we've walked through 9 opponents: the NFC South, the AFC South, and the other AFC team, the Baltimore Ravens. And I have the worst case scenario 5-4, probably should be 6-3, and the best case 8-1. So that's where we stand. I'm going to move on to the 2 tough teams in the NFC, the non-divisional, non-NFC South teams that we have on our schedule. 2 first-place teams, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. And we're going to do a much deeper dive into those 2 teams because those are obviously 2 teams that we could potentially meet in the playoffs, 2 teams that we would love to have home field advantage against if we do meet them in the playoffs. Although I think the Lions are going to have their work cut out for them this year. Packers and Vikings are going to be tough. The Bears on the prowl, and the Lions losing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, their 2 coordinators. Lions, they're going to be a good football team, but they're certainly at risk of taking a step back. But we'll save that for the next episode. Rams versus Eagles, Rams versus Lions. That'll be part 3 of parsing the Rams schedule here at Rams Up.